All right, so I'm sitting down here with Courtney Jones. She is a candidate for the MUN Alumni Board of Regents seat. There are 6 seats available. The election is going on now until August 22nd. Courtney, thanks for coming on an interview with me.
Thanks for having me.
Why did you decide to put your name forward for the Board of Regents seat?
So I graduated from MUN in 2019. I started studying. I was there for like almost 6 years, actually. I completed a Bachelor of Science in Behavioural Neuroscience, and I really enjoyed my time at MUN. But I mean, there's always room for improvement, and I was given a lot of opportunity while I was a student. Attending that university gave me a lot of opportunities. I learned a lot about myself while I was a student there, and I saw joining the Board of Regents as just an opportunity to give back and do what I could to improve the university for future generations.
So you are have you finished law school?
I have. I graduated last week, actually.
Well, congratulations. And you run a blog, a personal blog, and then also you're a co-founder of Feminist Law. Can you tell us a bit about Feminist Law and what you do there?
Yeah, so Feminist Law it's not really so much a personal blog as it is like, I guess, an information blog that myself and one of my fellow law graduates, Clara Topiel, started together. And the purpose of Feminist Law is essentially to share information about people's views on feminism and the law. So we invite people to come on the podcast. We have like lawyers, legal academics, law students who just come on, and for example, we might find an interesting research article and we'll talk to them about that, or, the recent developments in the law, or perhaps there's an interesting case that a lawyer's worked on and that's related to women's rights that we'll have them come on the podcast and talk about it. And we get different people to contribute articles. Submissions are always open, so anybody who wants to send in anything can.
Let's start with the $68.4 million cut that came in last semester with the doubling of tuition. So the provincial government announced that it was cutting from the tuition offset grant by the tune of $68.4 million, phased out over 5 years. And in response, the university and Board of Regents elected to raise tuition twofold. What did you take from that decision, and what do you hope to bring in terms of your voice, if elected, to the Board of Regents on that subject?
Well, I feel like my views on tuition hikes, I actually received a message on Twitter about this earlier. I have really complex views, I would say, on tuition fees. I think in general, they're really unfortunate. I mean, I was lucky to have attended Memorial University. I started going to that university at a time when tuition was $1,200 a term. And it's basically almost triple that now. So I definitely benefited from the lower tuition rates. And I think it's unfortunate that there are cuts being made to the funding to the university, because education is important. I think education is a right. And it's unfortunate that, obviously the money has to come from somewhere. It's just unfortunate that burden is being placed on the backs of students.
We have a lot of people mention, the Board of Regents, that it's a rubber stamp. One of the criticisms that's leveled at Board of Regents. How would you take the responsibility as being a Board of Regents member when it comes to the decisions made at the university?
I'm going to give a typical law graduate response here. I think as a board member, your responsibility is to the organization that you're serving. So I take that responsibility very seriously. Obviously, the purpose of the university is to serve the student body and the public as a whole, because the knowledge that comes out of like academic research and the education that is received by students in a university or college setting, but I'm going to focus on university because obviously we're talking about a university board here. I think it's a public benefit, and I think that needs to be kept in mind by members of the Board of Regents. And obviously your responsibility is to the university, but you need to keep in mind as a board member who that university is serving, which is, I think, the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, not just the student body, but the entire province, because wider access to education benefits society as a whole.
Universities across the West have experiencing, cuts from governments and changes in the way they're operated to be more of a corporate model rather than a public institution. Do you think MUN has lost sight of what it was designed to be?
Like I said earlier, the increase in tuition obviously harmed the most vulnerable students who otherwise, prior to the increase, might have been able to afford tuition and now can't. I do know that the federal government has increased its student aid funding, but that's not always enough. And I do see that across universities in general, that there's a focus on, it's almost like education is a product. And I'm not speaking about MUN specifically here, but I think general, like, education is kind of packaged as a product. Your degree certificate is packaged as this product that you get for paying your tuition fees and attending and doing the required, obviously you have to put the work in. I don't know that that's what MUN is becoming, and I don't want to say that it is because I haven't really had the chance to really think that through. But regardless, I don't think that's what it should be, because I think education is a public service and that's what education ought to be. And more education is good for the public.
You have experience on MUNSU. You were the women's representative and active in intersections, or at the time was the Women's Resource Center. What did you make of that experience, and how do you think that can lend to this role?
Well, I think my experience with that and other experiences that I've had, like volunteering with the Newfoundland and Labrador Sexual Assault Crisis and Prevention Center, which is now End Sexual Violence Newfoundland and Labrador, I think that's a really good experience to have coming onto the Board of Regents, because as women's representative and as a volunteer at intersections, I recognize that sexual harassment does exist on campus. And there's a subcommittee on the Board of Regents dedicated to kind of dealing with sexual harassment. So I think I'd be really well placed to kind of help in that regard, and, to maybe improve policies or be a voice for students who are experiencing sexual harassment on campus, as I actually have myself.
The Board of Regents comes along with a pretty strict confidentiality code. How do you feel you will navigate that in terms of violating the agreement, but still being able to show transparency at the Board of Regents?
Well, I think that's a question that would be easier to answer once you're actually on the Board of Regents, because I haven't seen the confidentiality agreement myself. So that's really difficult to answer. But I think you just need to keep in mind that the university is a public body that is, responsible to the public. So obviously there is transparency that is required, but the province does have an access to information request system for that purpose. So I think there is some transparency there. Obviously, transparency can always be better, but as a member of the Board of Regents, I wouldn't be able to violate any confidentiality. But doing my best to balance that, I think, is the approach I would take, because obviously confidentiality is important, especially if you signed a confidentiality agreement. But transparency to the public is also definitely essential, especially in a democratic society.
So if I'm an alumni graduate, why should I vote for you?
I think because I care about the university community. I'm about to embark on like a master's and a PhD. So obviously I very much love academia. I'm very dedicated to universities, and I think public education is incredibly important. And I don't think there's a reason to vote for me over another candidate. I think every candidate has something they're going to bring to the table. There are reasons that they would all make good board members. I just think I care about the university. I'm grateful for the opportunities it's given to me, and I would very much like the opportunity to give back to the university and the alumni community.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time speaking with us.
Thanks for having me.